started with the first topic. So if you're here watching live right now, please bear with me for just a moment. I'm going to reset the stream, and we will be right back within like 1 or 2 minutes. We are now live again. So this is take 2 of the Guff and Blaze live stream, where we're going to be talking about some topics dealing with the reconstruction revival movement, specifically to the Scandinavian traditions. With this, we're going to just have an open conversation, and all of those folks that are watching are welcome to join in chat and join us. We'll probably do a few more of these in the future too, so if you didn't catch this one live, you can, still talk in the comments and catch the next one live and hopefully join in, and we'll try to our best to answer some of the questions you might have out there. If you are new to my channel and you've not seen my stuff before, I'm basically an enthusiast who just likes to study things. And it's all sorts of things. I come at this from someone who reads books and researches online and talks to people in the community, like the historical heathen here, and just kind of have a nice casual conversation about things that I'm passionate about. And it's not just Scandinavian reconstruction revival stuff. It's sort of kind of anything new age, anything that has to do with what they might have done long ago in a galaxy far, far away. Could be Irish traditions, Asian traditions, doesn't matter. There's a whole bunch of different stuff I enjoy looking into. And the historical heathen here, if you want to introduce yourself again, since we restarted the stream due to technical difficulties.
That's all right. So yeah, I'm the historical heathen is what I go by usually on TikTok. Y'all can call me Guff. I am a lay scholar who studies Old Norse philology, which is the historic and evolutionary study of the language. And what basically started me in this was I was reading Holiday one day, and I studied Holiday, and through Gray's, Thorpe, and Bellows, they all had different translations, and it annoyed me till no end. I said, screw it, I'm just going to learn Old Norse myself. And then I started diving into academic research from all branches of knowledge, archaeology, sociology, theology, and it all just kind of revolves around my passion for linguistics, Norse linguistics. So that's where I come from.
And if you want to find the historical heathen, you can check out the links below in the description. So I'll put links to both your TikTok and your YouTube. And you're actually very active on TikTok. That's actually how I met you.
Yes, that's the reason I'm so active is because they're short videos, and people like shorter videos usually. So it just seems to work out, and you can communicate rather effectively on there.
And Soaring Eagle is saying, hello, Blaze. Hello, Soaring Eagle. Good to see you. How are you doing? But yes, I completely understand what you're saying, Guff. It's just people's attention span is short. It's actually one of the reasons I started reformatting some of the ways that I do my videos now on YouTube. Even I try to keep them shorter. People just, their attention spans.
Mic just cut out, buddy.
Oh no! Did it cut out for you?
Blaze. Can you say something, Blaze?
Yes. I see it on the channel.
Wow. We're getting plagued by every kind of no.
Yeah. I think it's the Discord mic that went out, so if you can still hear me live, let me know in the comments. Soaring Eagle been okay, just hanging in there? Good to hear. I'm glad things are at least going okay. I know lately a lot of people have been going through some guff. Haha. Guff, can you hear me now on Discord? Hello?
Discord.
Can you hear me on Discord? We're having some more technical difficulties. This is fun.
I can hear you back now.
Awesome. Okay. So you can hear me on Discord, and then hopefully they can hear me on the stream as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yep. Using Icelandic. Let's translate for the folks. Yao means yes, if you don't speak Icelandic. No, by all means. This is the perfect time to practice stuff like Icelandic is with people that either try to study it or do study it. I try.
Yeah, Discord was the issue. Yeah, I always practice with Evar because I spend most of my time reading and studying. I don't spend a lot of time actually speaking Icelandic. Other than when I'm reading something out loud.
Makes sense. And yeah, that's one thing I want to try to do is actually study the language more, and that can be a topic in and of itself. But
Oh
before
yeah.
we get too sidetracked, just because I know some folks will come here specifically to get answers to some of the topics that we're saying are going to be discussed, let's go back again to what we were saying about the term Norse itself and how people might use it, might not use it, and how you think you should use it and how I think you should use it.
Yeah, yeah. So Norse just means in the Old Danish, Old Norwegian, it means north-ish. Well, they obviously have different words, North and stuff like that, but it means northish or northern-esque. So when we use the word Norse in English, you know, we can apply it to the culture, the language, the people themselves. And when I see people using it in the modern or neo-pagan community, however you want to call it, I will hear people every now and then just say, "I am Norse," and I said, "Well, what part of Scandinavia are you from?" And they're like, "No, I'm just a Norse pagan." I said, "Oh, there's a little difference there." So I generally try to use the term heathen because that specifically refers to Viking Age or late Vendel period, early to Viking Age Scandinavian cultural beliefs, and that seems to be a little more accurate. I don't know. What do you think, Blaze?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm no more white noise. Soaring Eagle said, "Okay, yeah, I'm
Blaze?
I'm muting my mic on the stream whenever I'm not talking."
Your Discord one again.
Did it? Oh, wonder if there's a. Wonder if we should try a Skype call instead. Testing. But yes, Soaring Eagle, I was going to mute my stream mic whenever I was talking with the Guff.
I don't have to.
Can you hear me now? You don't have Skype? About to say,
No,
I wonder if we should
I can hear you
get you
now.
that in the future. Good. As long as you can hear me. What I was going to try to do is I was going to try to... actually, let me turn off my fan, too. I just realized that my fan's probably picking up for folks, too, in the background. Guff, the Nordic Guff. Right, exactly. So...
Gruff.
Gruff?
He called me gruff.
Guff, the Nordic Gruff. Ah, I did. I
Yeah.
missed an R on the second word there. So when I think of the term Norse, one thing I've noticed that is individuals in the community, I'm hearing them refer to themselves as I am Norse or I am a
Yeah.
Norse pagan. I even have a video on YouTube, how to become a Norse pagan. And the thing that I've come to a decision on more recently, because I had a different mind of this at one time, but more recently, I kind of feel like the term Norse itself refers to a people. So kind of like using the term Asian. And the way that I like to think about it now is if someone was to study, let's say Shinto. Shinto is a Japanese spirituality. And they wanted to, right. And let's say they wanted to start doing that, or even Taoism. And they're like, you know what, I want to follow the Tao. They wouldn't necessarily call themselves an Asian pagan or an Asian spiritualist if they weren't actually Asian. And I kind of equate right, exactly. And I think and that's kind of the point I'm getting at with Norse is I feel like using the term Norse to describe yourself or what you do doesn't really fit. Like I agree with you. If someone says I am following Norse paganism, that would make sense. If someone says I'm following a Norse path, that would make sense. But if somebody
I'm agreeing. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I just didn't want to cut you off. But if somebody is
Grammatically, yes, and that's what bugs me the most is I am Norse doesn't make any sense in a sentence. Are you a Norse person? Are you a Norse, pagan? Are you a, what are you referring to? And that's the problem is ambiguity through, not saying this in a bad way, but ignorance. When I first started, this path is what people call it. It's just my belief structure. When I first started, I was told straight up, we need to educate ourselves as much as humanly possible. We need to read the source material, but it seems modern neo-pagans aren't really into the academic education as much, and therefore we get a lot of bad things come out of it, like people misusing terminology very frequently like the term Norse or Nordic or any of the other, terms that would apply in this way. Like you said, with other religions as well, and other theological structures, I should say. Your turn.
Oh, I didn't unmute
Yeah.
my mic. Even I apologize. I left my mic muted for the stream. When I hear folks using the term Norse even to describe their path, I'm starting to get a little iffy on it. And the reason I say that is if we go back to the era that most people are trying to emulate the spirituality of today for Reconstruction revival, folks will typically refer to Norse referring to that Viking era. Well, the Viking era, they
Yes.
didn't call themselves Norse. We call them that today. So I usually equate the term Norse anymore, not just talking about Scandinavian people from the north, just like you were saying, Guff, but I also kind of equate it, to me, it almost refers to a time period as well, where it's like if you're saying, oh, that's a Nordic tradition or a Norse tradition, you're usually trying to refer to that Viking era in most cases.
Yeah, you're definitely in when you say Norse, because and it deals mostly with, and especially from my side, with the language. The language itself was called Old Norse. So when I say the Norse era, I'm specifically speaking about the time when people spoke Old Norse, because it just makes sense.
Right. Soaring Eagle had a comment. It's like saying I'm a Nord Eagle when really I should be saying I'm just a plain old eagle for namesake. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another reason, too, that I get a little iffy about the way the term Norse is used today, and again, this is just my opinion. I'm not trying to dictate to folks watching, you can't call yourself Norse. I'm letting you know that I don't think you should call yourself that, and this is why. This is my justification behind it. But even using the term to describe your path and to say, well, I'm a Norse pagan, comes down to exactly what we've been talking about, Guff, for I don't even know how many months, years, what? I don't know how long I've known you now. But the fact that people aren't studying the source material. They're coming up with their own path inspired by the past. We don't know everything they used to do. And honestly, I don't know about you, but I don't think we should be doing a lot of the stuff they used to do back in the Viking era. So to call yourself a Norse pagan today or following a Norse pagan path, I almost feel like it's misleading to a degree. Because even though it's inspired by, I don't really feel like what we do today is Norse anymore. What do you think about that?
I kind of disagree with you. I tried to. I like the way they did things in the Viking Age. It was very simple. Um, I mean, if we look at the way they were as people, it would be like a lot more like when I was growing up than modernly. Um, like I mean, in 2015 to now, and there's some bad, there's some good, but uh, you know, like before when I was a kid, I've settled fights in school. Like I had an issue with another kid, and the wrestling coach put us in the back room and said, "All right, get it done," and we did. And I like the simplicity in being able to solve problems without having to, I don't know, worry about getting doxxed or canceled on Twitter. I don't particularly like where we're going as a society, and I think that when I say I am a Norse heathen pagan, whatever terminology I'm using at the time, it's because I'm trying to stay to those roots. I mean, and it applies everywhere. Like if we look at the Eddas and the sagas, um, like Havamal, for example, that's a book of proverbs, right? And applying that to your daily life, it's timeless information. Don't get me wrong, but it's something it seems people aren't interested in and aren't interested in following anymore. So paganism can evolve for sure, but I'm not a fan of UPG or basically any practice that doesn't evolve the traditions. If it's just doing your own thing, which again is more than fine, it's just not traditional Norse quote unquote paganism. It's not heathenry. And as a heathen, and this is going to tip some people, I suppose. I'm a traditionalist, which accurately portraying that in the English language, I would say I am folkish. Not to be confused with the AFA, the Norrena Society, the Odinic Rite, or any of other those organizations that have a lot of problems, specifically in the racial not being okay with other people area. But I am folkish. I think that we should try to stick to our roots as much as possible. I think there's something there. Now, again, evolving the traditions is fine because, like I was just saying on my TikTok the other day, back in the Viking Age, there was no such thing, for example, as an LGBTQ plus community. And I think that's a fine thing to be able to be who you are as a person and be accepted for that no matter what. So, I mean, as we evolve, as society evolves, things do get better, but you know, we can't just basically throw all the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think it should be all new age reinterpreted stuff. I think we should focus on the Eddas, the sagas, and the source material as much as humanly possible. What do you think, Blaze?
Well, I want to jump back on what you were saying about folkish real quick, just because you're right.
Yeah.
The community, especially the heathen reconstruction revival community today, tends to get very triggered with that word because they make a false association with individuals who use that term. When in reality, I think the clarification I would like to put on it is you have folk traditions, which are basically natural traditions for a culture and society. So when someone says that they're folkish, that means they follow the traditions of that culture and society. It does not necessarily mean how some people who also identify as folkish share. It's a universal belief. It's an approach.
There's a really easy way to explain this. The definition, because this is how often I talk about it. Folkish, the definition in the Merriam-Webster dictionary is a characteristic of common people or traditional culture. So if one follows traditional culture, they are folkish. This is not to be confused with the Völkisch movement or Völkisch movement from the early 1900s, late 1800s in Northern Europe / Germany, which has close ties to Odinism and all that jazz, and essentially where the Odinic Rite got its start, and how modern neo-paganism, the Odinic Rite, the Norrena Society, the AFA, the Ausothic Delegate, all of them started around the same time, right? And did you have another question before we jump into? Well, sorry, I'm just running over a different topic here, but
it's all right. It's all right. That's why I'm here as
Blaze?
a. Can you hear me? He can't hear me again.
Uh-oh, I think your mic went out again.
So what I'm doing for those of you who are watching the stream, you'll see him vanish and reappear, and the reason he's doing that is I'm disconnecting from Discord and then I'm rejoining the call on Discord to try to get it to work. I'm using Discord to talk to him. Can you hear me now, Guff? Testing. 1, 2, 3. Hello. Technical difficulties. Now, I can still hear him even when I go out, and I don't think he knows that. So once he actually can hear me again, we will continue the conversation.
No, I cannot hear you now.
You can't hear me now. All right. Let's see. What if I mute and unmute? How about now? Testing. 1, 2, 3. I wonder. Let's see. What if I voice meter? What if I switch this over to? He left the call and he's going to rejoin the call. What if I switch this over to my Scarlet Solo like that? See if that helps at all. Can you hear me now? Guff? I can't hear him now. Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3. Hello. Yeah, I see my green light popping up here. You can see that where his face was. I just presume if Guff disappears, he went to Freya's Hall for all intents and purposes. Right? I know there's an actual name for her hall, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But yeah, it is said that the slain are chosen by the Valkyrie, which are the choosers, or the Valkyrie. Valkyrie. I don't remember the Scandinavian way of saying it. That's why we need Guff back on. And they would apparently divide up the slain between Freya and Othin. Othin's hall was known as Valhall. So yes, I get the reference and joke. Oh, is he back? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. If you can hear me, I cannot hear you now. You can hear me. I saw that. I saw your lip movement. So before, when I was going out, you, I could still hear you before, but now I can't right now. Let me double check something. Let's see, under settings. Make sure you don't have your stuff muted like what you checked last time. All right, I'm going to make you vanish for a second. Display capture, turn that off. I'm going to go here to my user settings again. Video, voice and video. So the output device, that's what it is. High definition audio speakers, input Scarlet Solo. Say something now.
You're all right.
I can hear you again, my friend. You are back. He is back.
Cold thunder.
Oh, thank you.
Can you not hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me? Uh-oh, he can't hear me. All right. I did not think this was going to be this difficult. Guess Freya didn't want him, right? Say something now, Guff.
Hello?
Yep, I can hear you.
This is why. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me, though?
Hello?
See, I wonder... Yes, I know you can hear both of us, Soaring Eagle. I'm wondering why Guff is losing... Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Wonder if it's your output settings.
I'm looking. It says it's good.
So you can hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, so we're back for right now. Yeah, that's...
Wow.
So for future ones, let's look into doing Skype together or something instead of Discord.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah, I've never had trouble like this on Discord ever. It's really bizarre. But yeah, so back to what we were saying before we got technical difficulties again. We were talking about Norse when we started going into the UPG stuff, which is one of our topics that I definitely want to talk about. So in closing, I want to make some closing comments on the Norse topic, and then let's go on to UPG. So with the Norse thing, I think I still have a pretty firm stance that I don't think, in my opinion, folks should use the term Norse for themselves unless they're actually Scandinavian. I don't think I'm moving on that part. What you're saying to me about calling your path Norse paganism does resonate. I do see where you're coming from on that. And you're right, things do evolve. So even though I'm not a huge fan of it, that is something that I've been mulling over myself more recently. But I think I'm willing to bend on that. I think what you're saying here, you've convinced me that using the term to describe modern reconstruction revival paths that are heathen in nature, calling them Norse paganism does make sense. Because you're right. Going back to the original sources, using that to build off of, yeah, that all makes sense to me. So, okay. I think I'm sold on that part. Soaring Eagle said, when you both get done, I wanted to ask why we who grow up with English call them Odin and Valhalla. Oh, great question. Great question. Guff, I see you chomping at the bit there. Do you want to start?
I don't know, actually. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
I was going to call
Yeah,
bullshit,
so-
okay? I was going to call bullshit.
So those are the anglicized versions of the name. We have Odin. Hi, baby boy. We have Odin, which means the crazy one, mad one. And it's OF, like the droopy D with a slash through it, INN, because INN means the. It's the, well, I've been talking about verbs too much. I was about to say participle. It's the definite article, the word the. And old means mad or crazy. Anyways, so when we anglicize them, we have to make them easier to say in English, and also they don't decline. Like their nouns have four different declensions depending on what part of a sentence you use it in. So in Old Norse and Icelandic, we would call him Odin, and we would call his hall Valhall. Valhalla is I believe it is the plural genitive of the word Valhall. Because there's two A's, and well, in the second part of the word Val, of course, meaning the slain, Hall meaning hall. So in the word Halla, there's two A's which would obviate an O umlaut, and what's called an A umlaut, and it would change basically the second A to a O with two double diareses over it, which makes the sound, like in the word ux, which means shoulder in Old Norse and Icelandic. That's why. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me? Did my mic come back this time?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Don't mute yourself, jeez.
I did. I muted myself again. I don't want them to have the extra feedback. Hopefully, Soaring Eagle turning my fan off has helped with some of the white noise. It's actually interesting too that Valhalla is not the only word they did that to. They actually did that to Hell's name as well. Like I'm sure you've heard Hella. It's actually just Hell as an example.
Yeah, they do it to a bunch of words because, yeah, your question was absolutely respectful. You're just asking about linguistics. This is what I love. So yeah, I mean they do it all the time, but you got to realize in Old Norse and Icelandic, they slap words together a lot, and yeah, hell. But they do it with everything. I mean, when you anglicize a word, you take away the declensions usually. So when you hear an R at the end of an Old Norse word, it's usually because it's a strong masculine noun, like Hester. But it's used in the nominative case, meaning the subject of a sentence. So it'll be Hester. If it's the subject, it'll be Hest. If it's in the accusative or the direct object, Hest-e. In the indirect object, and Hests. If it's in the genitive, which means the possessive case. This is where we get the S on the end of names when we're saying that's Blaze's dog, for example. That S comes directly from Germanic languages in Norse. Speaking of which, we're about 40% of a Germanic language still, English, but it's been thoroughly mixed with the Romance languages, French and Latin. But you'll notice Jormungandr, excuse me, Jormung, or how do they say it in English? Jormungand?
Yeah, Jormungandr or Jormungandr. That's the two A's I've heard it in English.
Yeah, Angraboda is what they call it. Angraboda. Loki's the same, Loki. But same with, well, Thor, we don't really see it, but it's actually pronounced Thor. But I mean, I can do that with pretty much every single, Old Norse name. They make it easier for English speakers to pronounce by dropping all of the grammar and just putting the basic, essentially the infinitive of the word, the basic form of it.
All right, so this is me reaching into the rabbit hole to pull Guff back out of it.
Sorry.
Soaring Eagle, this is the perfect place to ask questions about linguistics, because I'll tell you right now, this is, as Guff just clearly shown, this is his baby. This is what he does. And I will actually sometimes reach out to him to confirm things I think. Both of us attempt to speak Icelandic. He is much further along than I am. And when I will talk about stuff like Odin, I like to use as close as I can get to the actual pronunciations of the words because I know how to say them. So that's just a preference of mine as I like to use it. So some people they'll look at me like I have three heads, especially when the word is way off. Like Odin is close enough that you get an idea. But once you start talking about stuff like Bifrost, most people are not going to look at Bifrost and understand why I'm saying Bifrost out of that. Or even Sif's name is actually Siv, as an example, because they don't study it. But yeah, it's just a habit of mine, and we could make an entire, probably could do an entire live on that. But if you want to see a lot of that, Historical Heathen actually has TikToks where he goes into pretty deep detail on the language and how it's reconstructed. Because what
Way
he's
too much detail.
right, right, and we can talk about runes in the future too. But like he'll actually go back to the actual younger Futhark and talk about how they were written out and how you read it and how it probably is pronounced based upon modern Icelandic. Because that's how, if you want to get into this, you start with modern Icelandic and you work your way backwards, and then we can get some assumptions based upon Old Icelandic, which is the closest thing we have today to Old Norse. But
Yeah, and the only way to get closer is to actually read the first grammatical treatise and the second grammatical treatise, which details Old Norse is the closest equivalent. And Old Icelandic, which is the bridge language, wasn't a language really till 1350 when they nailed down how they were going to correctly spell and write it in the Latin alphabet compared to the runic road.
it looks like Soaring Eagle said, I still have a hard time pronouncing Thor's Old Norse name simply because of that roll. And yeah, honestly, now people in Scandinavian countries today, Swedish, Norwegian, Icelandic, they roll their R's all the time, even today. Yeah. So for them, it's much easier. But honestly, if you say Thor, everyone's going to know who you're talking about. And you don't have to necessarily go Thor. You can, but it's just fun to do.
I actually just call him Thor. People, yeah. I'll say Wolven, but I say Thor. Sometimes I'll it's called a trill. And usually, just so you guys are aware, if you do a trill in Old Norse, it's easier to do a uvular or palative trill, which is in the back of your throat, than your what's it called? Alveolar trill. Alveolar is that little space above your teeth. More linguistic stuff. Help me, Blaze. Sorry.
I'm using camera tricks to make it look like I'm looking at you because
you're what?
Using camera tricks, so I'm like turning it to the camera so it looks like I'm looking at you.
The next subject while you fix your mic.
Oh, you can't. Oh, again, the mic's out.
Because I can't hear you again. Do the delete thing on me again.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Anyways, man, I really don't want to go on to the next subject about your go-ahead. It's your baby, as it is.
Testing. Can you hear me? Guff?
Goodness.
Hello. 1, 2, 3.
Blaze, can you hear me, bud?
I can't even type yes properly.
Yeah, you can hear me. Is it okay? UPG / where the
testing.
Oh yeah, I just heard
okay. You. Yeah, I just leave and rejoin the call. Can you hear me now?
I heard you for a second.
And I'm gone again?
Anyways, is it okay if I go on to the UPG and where modern reconstruction Norse pagan heathen movements came from?
Testing. Can you hear me now? Hello?
You can just type yes in the chat if you'd like. I'm just double checking my stuff to make sure you still hear me. Oops.
Can you hear me now?
No,
testing.
Go back to the ongoing call. Go back to.
Sorry, everyone. This is.
Settings. Yeah, it still says I'm good. So.
Let me try this. I wonder if this will make a difference. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm about to say, the reason you can't continue yet is because I have to disconnect and reconnect to get the mic working again. If it goes out again, I'm going to try to use my headset microphone for you and my nice fancy microphone for the stream.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix anything.
It's okay. This was an experiment. I really wanted to have a live with Guff because I've been wanting to do a collaboration with him for a while now. Again, I met him on TikTok, and he is one of the few people who's willing to take the effort to go back to the original sources. And other people tend to do UPG stuff instead, and only that. Hey, look at that. I'm leading right into the topic. And it's not that I think UPG is wrong. So let's define UPG. As I understand it, it is unverified personal gnosis. Is that accurate?
Unverified or Oh, unsupported is what I usually call it, but unverified is correct.
Okay. Yeah. But basically what it comes down to is somebody does their own thing, and then that is their validation. That's why they do what they do. Anyone who's seen a lot of my videos lately, aside from the fact that they're shorter than they used to be, they're no longer hour-long videos, is I've been talking a lot about sources. Share your sources. And I started doing that a lot more after talking to Guff on TikTok, because I realized something. How do you learn? Like, I share information on YouTube all the time, but how do you know what I'm saying is right? And I've noticed that as I started researching and trying to come up with references, I had some conversations, great conversations with Guff on TikTok. One of them, and we won't do it today, so hold back, Guff, hold back, Sather, and whether or not it means magic. And we had a wonderful conversation on it. And Guff has this thing where he says, what are your sources? He says it all the time. And I'm just like, what are my sources? How do I even know this is real? So I think that there is something to be said for taking a source and then taking the stuff that's made up as you go and separating them. I think there's a lot of value in your own personal UPG. UPG is talking about what you've experienced, what you think is right through feeling, through practice, or through hearsay. And there's value in it. But when you start passing that off to others in the community as fact, that's when I think we start having problems. What about you, Guff? What do you think about UPG on a whole?
We have a lot of problems with UPG. So the way I usually say it is UPG is subjective and academia is objective. So when we have people presenting their subjective reality, subjective ideas and they present them as academic objective fact, we run into a lot of problems. I just got a guy really mad on Facebook the other day because um, he basically said that we can't believe the Eddas because they were written by Christians, and he's kind of wrong, but kind of right. Snorri Sturluson was in fact Christian, but his father was a pagan, and he's a part of the oral tradition, right? He was an actual skald, and this is how he got famous. This is how he became a lost, and he was also a historian, and so we need to look at that stuff. And regardless of how we feel about the material, we need to study it because it is considered source material. Now, when I argue with people who present UPG as fact, I often run into the problem of when I'm trying to present academic evidence, they're just like, well, I don't believe to the authority of what you're citing. I said, I'm citing from objective reality. You're citing from a subjective feeling. Objective reality is, like I can go across the world into any college or any place where somebody's read this material because it's out there, and basically they'll know what I'm talking about. It's all in your mind, your UPG, so you're going to have to explain it in your reasoning. And the reason I shelf UPG in general is because it's usually never ever built off or evolved from a tradition. And Norse paganism, or heathenry as I call it, is traditional stuff. It's based off the cultural traditions of the Norse people, of the Scandinavian people from the Norse era, the Viking era, the Vendel period, whatever you want to call it. So UPG is fine in personal practice, and I have a lot of friends who do a lot of UPG. I don't. I don't think I have any type of UPG that I employ in my personal practice, and I don't entertain any of it academic when I'm doing research and stuff. But that's not to say that people can't enjoy the yes, yes, yes. My doggy wanted to say hi. I don't see a problem with people employing it in their daily practice or their personal practice, so long as, like you said, we don't mix the two. Because if we mix the two, then basically it's not heathenry anymore. It's a theological structure based on heathenry or Norse paganism. It's kind of my thoughts on it.
Testing. Can you hear me, Guff?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Just before I start talking and realizing there's silence. Yeah, no, and I think that's my biggest complaint with UPG is I'm very much a big driver of UPG, but then again, I also don't specifically identify as Norse or Scandinavian. It's part of it, because it's part of my heritage, and I find a connection there. It feels right.
Oh, you
But
just cut out.
of course I cut out. Of course I did. All right.
I don't know what happened.
Let me try
said-
to do
I identify it.
this. So hold on for a second.
As part of my heritage, and then crank right out to the left.
User settings, voice and
Oh, I
video.
thought I was using testing. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Logitech USB. Can you hear me now?
I'll just listen.
Testing.
Someone like what sources would you recommend to an average eagle
No,
like
I can't hear
myself
me,
to
of
start with?
course.
Well, since you're soaring, there is 3 sources which I recommend to every person, and they are called the Prose Edda, which is called also Snorri's Edda, that was written by Snorri Sturluson in the 1200s, and then we have the Poetic Edda. The Prose Edda obviously is written in prose format, which means sentence and paragraph. But the Poetic Edda is
Testing.
Stories about the gods, but written
Testing.
in poem form, and they are from the Viking Age. Just they weren't written down on parchment or skin until the 1200s as well. And then the third piece of information, or third manuscript, would be called Heimskringla. It means circle of the world. It's commonly referred to as the sagas, and it's basically the history of the Vikings from the Viking perspective. Snorri also wrote that, and in the beginning of Snorri's Edda and Heimskringla, he basically gives his professional opinion because he is legitimately was legitimately a historian and a skald, and he actually he cites his source in Heimskringla and says, "Hey, this I get it from Keep the Skald." And in the prose that he talks about, him learning, basically what he knows from his life of being an educated man, a scholar, and he amalgamates in the foreword. He amalgamates the gods to actually be essentially men that were elevated to godhood through history. They were deified through history because they were so important, and he sets essentially just the whole setting for the gods in Detroit. By the way, Blaze, can I hear you yet? Yep.
Okay, I also changed my mic settings on Discord, make it a little more sensitive, so maybe it was my volume would go out or something. Let me move the mic closer too. We'll figure this out. We'll have this fixed for future ones as well. So
this is a test.
Right. And Soaring Eagle, just to share my thoughts on things to read, I actually, if I'm going to reference you to my How to Become a Norse Pagan video, I actually have a whole section. I have a timestamps where you can jump around, and you can jump to the reading section. And that actually mentions a lot of the sagas and stuff that Guff was talking about, with links to some of them online. So, cool. UPG stuff. So the other thing I was going to mention about UPG before I cut out was I was talking about the fact that I think it's very important, and I wanted to point out that I'm not exclusively following a Scandinavian reconstruction revival movement type of thing. I do my own thing. I don't really label it. I think once, let's see if I still have it written down. Once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away, I did. So if I was going to call myself anything, I would call myself an eclectic, monistic, animistic polytheist.
Wow, that's helpful.
Well, it's because I feel like there's wisdom in everything, and I don't want to specifically identify with one path when there's so much to learn from. And I do have a very diverse background from where my ancestors came from, and I do like things like that, but I also like learning from things I didn't come from. But essentially, eclectic is where you mix and match things together. You can have an eclectic taste in music. Animistic is kind of like basically where you believe that there are individual spirits and stuff within inside nature. There's this like life to life. Everything around you has a life to it, basically. A monistic mindset is basically where you're thinking and viewing metaphysics that reality is unified as a whole. Everything's connected, kind of like the Force in Star Wars. Everything is connected. And then polytheistic just means multiple deities. Yeah. I study, and I've studied tons of stuff. I've studied modern Druidry, modern Heathenry. I've studied Taoism, the philosophical version of Taoism that we study in the West, because it's much different over in the East in China, which is one of the reasons I was bringing that up. I've studied Shinto, I've studied shamanism, spirituality, as I've studied Wicca, witchcraft. I've done all of this different stuff in reading, and I keep going. So I don't just go with one. So for me, UPG makes a lot of sense because it's how I experience spirituality. However, when I pass off information, I don't pass it off as a stamp of this is the only way to do it. I tell people, from my experience, in my opinion, I clarify that. And I'm seeing a lot of people, in specifically the Heathen Reconstruction Revival movement, not do that. There's this thing online like called the hammer test or something. I had never heard of it, and I can find no reference to it actually existing. But people are passing this off, saying this is what you have to do.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't call what you do UPG by and large. You research and study academically different sources, and you kind of amalgamated your own belief structure. That's not UPG. You're just eclectic in that sense. But that's true eclecticism when you're actually going to source material. UPG is unverified personal gnosis. Gnosis being like knowledge of magical or mystical happenings or forces. So when people talk about the runes in magical context, which definitely comes from the modern reconstruction, before actually people were reconstructing the religion from the AFA Odinic Rite, the Norrena Society, all those. But that's something quite different than actually looking into a different religions or different uh, philosophical slash theological belief structures. You know what I mean?
That is a good point. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Very
So
good.
maybe that mic problem was the problem, changing the sensitivity.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a challenge from Soaring Eagle real quick. Apparently she thought it was funny, so let's see if I can do this. Eclectic, monistic, animistic, polytheist. Eclectic, monistic, animistic, polytheist. Eclectic, monistic, no, I can't do it 5 times fast. All right, sorry. Solid challenge. I had to try.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. I haven't heard UPG a lot until I started talking to you, and then I kind of looked up what it was, and I was kind of like, oh, okay. I was like, yeah, kind of makes sense. I can kind of see this. So maybe I don't know the best way of what material can be classified into it. But I usually think of people inventing stuff and then trying to pass it off as fact. That's usually when I think of UPG.
That is UPG. But you actually look into source material, so I mean, and from different sources, but there's actual objective material. Like anybody can see this. It's not, when you get like subjective feelings, like for example, sorry, you got loud for there for a second on the live or on the stream. We see a lot of this in the Reconstruction movement. I mean, did you want to end the UPG talk before we get into the Reconstruction?
That's a good point. That was all I had to really say on UPG today, because obviously any of these topics we could turn it into their own streams. So the next thing that we had actually was making things up. Did you want to go there next?
Yeah, because it kind of ties into where modern heathenry, modern neo paganism, neo modern Norse paganism or modern neo paganism, as I usually like to say, where it came from and making stuff up. This goes kind of hand in hand. So in the 1820s, there was a Church of Odin in northern Europe, and by the late 1800s, I can't remember the guy's name, but like 1890s, he basically started Odinism, and he was a no, thank you, ma'am. He was a member of the fascist party, the German, well, kind of the German Socialist Worker Party. He supported those guys, if you know what I'm talking about. And you know what I mean, Blaze? The German Socialist Worker Party is the Nazis. Yeah. So,
And I
and
did not unmute
anyways,
my mic for the stream. Nice. Okay, go ahead.
so the occultism that you find in Odinism, or that began in Odinism, was also shared with the Nazi Party, and like where you see like the Sonderrat. the Black Sun is what it's called. Um, it's in Nuremberg Castle. It's a hate symbol, is what it is. There's a bunch of what they call sig runes, which means victory in Old Norse, and a bunch of S's in a circle. That's a bad symbol. Anyways, they that movement kind of gained popularity in Northern Europe, and it kind of transferred over to England, where these two fellers, John Yole and John Gibbs Bailey, started the Odinic Rite. These are card-carrying members of, card-carrying fascists, literally, and they also supported the German Socialist Worker Party. Well, fast forward to the 70s, and they started late 60s, early 70s. They started their own uh, neo reconstruction movement from ancient Scandinavia slash Britain. And what they did was they would take some Norse stuff, like the word weird, um, which is Urther in Old Norse, and gave it English cognate, weird. Frith comes from Frithu. These concepts, and they would basically try to make them Anglo-Saxon paganism. Well, about the 70s, about that same time, the AFA, or the Asatru Free Assembly in America, started up. And this is all while in the 70s, the Osatru Felagith, which was from Iceland, started up. So we have three major Reconstructionist movements starting all at once. The ones that were closest following was the Osatru Felagith, because, well, they speak and read Old Norse very easily. So they would just reconstruct exactly how they saw it in the sagas, the Eddas, and so it was pretty clean cut and very true to form. That being said, the Odinic Rite was started by a couple of people who didn't really know what they were doing, and the same with the AFA and Stephen McNallen. Both of those groups, the AFA and the Odinic Rite, have had very unfortunate ties with racism throughout the entirety of the organizations. And there's this man, he has a PhD in Germanic languages and medieval history. His name is Edred Thorson. Also goes by Dr. Stephen, or that's his pseudonym. His real name is Dr. Stephen Flowers. He wrote a few books like the Galdra book and others where he would take Germanic mysticism and then present it as academia, like with Galdra Stafir, the Icelandic magic staves, for instance. And
I
he
actually have
also
that book right over here.
yeah, I have a copy of it too, and trolled over. But he did this, and then he looked at old rune poems, and he kind of made up this system of esoteric meanings for runes that were never historically there. Because we have plenty of good books on runes. Michael P. Barnes, Runes, the handbook. It's really cheap on Amazon right now. It's like $30. If you want to know more about runes, you go there. And they kind of started making this system up. There was another guy, Thor something. It was an assumed name, a pseudonym, and he wrote the Nine Noble Virtues, and they were called like the Six something at the time. And this is also where hammer tests come from. You have to have a certain amount of knowledge. You have to know the Nine Noble Virtues. You have to know the name of the 12 Asir, 12 main Asir, and a few other things. I don't remember exactly because, well, I never went through that. But after you do all those, and I think you have to swear an oath first. Don't do that, by the way, folks. Bad juju. Then you are allowed to wear a hammer, Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. That is all modern UPG. The runes being used for esoteric meanings or magical meanings, and that harkens directly back to Nazi occultism, like directly there. People like to reference that it comes from Tacitus's account, which is in the 1st century, which is 600 years before the Vikings were ever a thing. When Tacitus writes a book about another's account saying that they cast lots, they cut a tree branch and they cast lots. There's absolutely no evidence that runes were involved, and that would be elder Futhark runes rather than younger Futhark runes. We do have examples of it in the sagas. Of runes being used magically in like Sigtryfusmal, where the witch, it says if you go to another man's house carve the Nowth rune on your thumb, and carve. I think it was the term Galdralag, a magic verse on a cup, and she won't be able to poison you or something like that. And this is kind of the point of where I'm going back to UPG. We have every version of 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 academia available to us, including magical sources. But people tend to go for UPG because there's more symmetry in it. Because if you're making it up or filling in gaps, it's a lot easier to have a fleshed out version of it. But the problem is there's no academic support, so it's definitely unverified and unsupported. And that's where UPG kind of takes off. And now it's to the point, and that started again in the Nazi era, but now it's to such a point where people are giving rune readings and using runes for divination when we have no direct proof that they were used in such a fashion. But we that's kind of the sad thing, is because we do actually have passages that talk about magic, and if somebody was to devote themselves to accruing all this information and kind of writing a doctrine on how it would be used, it would be very beneficial to the community at large currently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Your turn, bud.
yeah, I was about to say, I'm chomping at the bit here. We're talking about magic now, and I think that's made up stuff, and you've covered a lot, so there's a lot to comment on. But I want to focus in on a few things. Well, no, it's fine. I appreciate it. I like talking with you. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Let's start with the runes. And the reason the runes frustrate me so much. So I want to say something first, especially if you are watching this and you're a rune reader. I'm not saying you can't read the runes and that they don't work. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, if you do divinatory practices at all, you can use dice, coins, playing cards, anything that you want. If you actually look at tarot, a lot of people are like, "Oh, tarot is special." I cut out for you. I cut out for him. Let me.
Well, my Blaze is fixing his. By the way. Yeah, no,
Test.
I'm definitely not saying you can't use the runes for esoteric meanings. I'm just saying academically it's not supported. Therefore, we shouldn't present it as academia or academic objective truth. That's again, I'm super disappointed in the modern heathen community for having all this enthusiasm, but misplacing it so hard in UPG. With all this enthusiasm and drive, tenacity to learn, it would be better spent doing it in an academic fashion. Blaze is restarting me up. Blaze, you there yet?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I heard you.
Okay.
You said test once.
Yeah. So when you talk, when I'm trying to reboot, I gotta wait. Can you hear me? Testing.
I think you just said test on the.
Hello. Can you hear me now? Man,
What the heck?
Discord is making me so angry today. Why is Discord misbehaving so much?
That's the video.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hello? Hello. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Test. Yeah, see, it's got to be something on his end. I've never had so much issues with trying to connect.
Idiot.
Hello?
Oh, I just heard.
You hear me now? Hello.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's got to be something on your end, because I'm checking my stuff and Discord's all working here and I'm getting sensitivity spikes and everything. Anyway, back to the runes, if you can still hear me.
Yes.
Okay. So with the runes, as I was mentioning, you can use a lot of different things for divinatory purposes. Specifically, I was mentioning the tarot. Tarot cards are actually playing cards. A lot of people don't realize that. They were not invented for reading. Yes, they're made today for reading, but they started out as a game. You can actually look up the rules of tarot. And the runes themselves, there's two things that frustrate me about them. So first of all, I know people who read with them read very successfully. Go for it if that's what you want to do. But the runes are Elder Futhark. They're not even Norse. They're Proto-Norse. Like the younger Futhark is the runes that were
Proto-Germanic.
used during Proto-Germanic. Yeah. The younger Futhark are the runes used during the Viking era. And if we
Yeah.
look up actual talismans, I believe, what are they? Talfer, I believe is the term for them. Is that right?
Talisman means charm, but yeah, I
Yeah.
guess you could make a talisman out of the charm. So
So
yeah,
so we have some that you can actually find, and they're like little pieces of bronze, and there's actually like a prayer almost written out on them in younger Futhark. There's an actual full script. So it's not like we have
are you talking about
references.
practice?
I'm talking about like I'll send you a link later, but there are these little. I think I actually have them written down. I've got a huge section for Norse stuff. Let me
Are they
see.
coin-looking things?
Yeah, sometimes this one was a flat square that they found. Um, let's see.
It's like a
Sagas,
bracket, but
generals,
anyways, yeah.
symbols,
Go ahead.
magic, spells, examples. This might actually be. Yeah, this is where it's at. So if you go to the Kinvi amulet, right? Kinvi amulet. If you look that up, and I will post a link here in the chat real quick. This is an example of one. Of course, it doesn't have the. Yeah, it has the picture if you scroll down to the bottom of it too. So let me post this in chat so everyone can see it. So if you go there, as an example, it's on Wiki, but you can find it in other locations as well. But it's actually just a tiny plate, and it has a prayer written out to Thor, and it's a script. So we see examples of the runes used, but we don't find divinatory meanings behind them. And earlier, Guff, you mentioned the rune poems. There are Norwegian and Icelandic rune poems that match exactly with what folks like Flowers is saying, how you read the runes. But those are modern rune poems. Those do not date back to the Viking era. And this is an example of things being made up today that people are trying to apply to everyone. And now everyone today is buying runes and trying to cast runes and read the future. And even though they're making it work, because that's the nature of divination, you can use anything to kind of speak with your higher self. That's one way of doing divination, speaking with the higher self. But to try to pass this off and tell folks is how you use it, where I see people getting tattoos in Elder Futhark. And it's like, so you're using English words with letters from Elder Futhark, and it's like, that's when you start blending things in a weird way. And to me, it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit in the way
I
that
did
I
that.
say things. Have you? And
I had a
that's
runic. I had a runic tattoo, and because I didn't know any better, and it's a 10-year-old tattoo now, and it's covered. But I did it, and I didn't know any better. This is why I'm so all about teaching people about runes, and why I'm going to do more on my profile. But I think it's really important. I think if anybody wants to truly be an adherent of heathenry, they should learn Old Norse. I mean, the Judaism is all about learning what is that? Not Aramaic, but Israeli, essentially Yiddish. Excuse me. And Islam's all about even if you're an adherent from anywhere in the world, you're supposed to learn not Farsi, but whatever their languages there. And I think it benefits everybody greatly to understand at least an eighth grade reading level, which isn't that hard to attain. Really, it's not. But being able to understand the basics of how words are formed, Hebrew, thank you. Jeez Louise. Um, it's just really important, especially if you're going to look at the sagas and the Eddas, because a lot of times they don't translate Gullfaxi. What that's the name, but it means gold mane. Um, it's just I think it's really important to have a basic understanding, because once one has a basic education, they wouldn't make such mistakes as applying different rune sets to different to the wrong era, especially, or having such weird misconceptions. Because I'll tell you, half the time I'm just educating people on their misconceptions, and that's kind of the whole thing. Is they're like, wow, I don't understand this. I learned all this different stuff, and I said, yeah, that's because when you read just regular published books by just regular folks, or unfortunately, it's mostly the heathen publishers who are the least knowledgeable in the area. And if you go over to academic studies, these people who actually, study the source material, whatever it is, archaeology or linguistics, they're super knowledgeable, but you get people who've been influenced by Edward Thorson or the AFA or the Odinic Rite for the last 53 years, you know, and you wonder why people are so confused about this stuff. It's sad. Again, it's super sad to see all this tenacity in young pagan and them not really, go anywhere with it and get frustrated and do other things rather than look at academic material. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on my
No,
tangent.
you're good. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So far. um, I almost want to spend special time talking about the AFA because I've got mixed feelings. I've met folks from the AFA not knowing they're from the AFA, and they've actually been reasonable.
Super nice.
Yeah. But again, it's people. People can join anything. Regardless, I've got mixed feelings about the AFA, both negative and positive. So, but I don't want to really attack them, and I don't want to get into it in too detail. What I do want to point out is I know how you feel about them. I personally, though, I've met some of them that I actually have good experiences with. But the reason I wanted to bring them up is specifically about making things up. So I was doing research as one does. I was looking for local groups that were also in the reconstruction revival stuff, and guess who I ran across? The AFA, not knowing who they were. So I talked to some of them. Like I said, some of them seemed pretty cool. But one of the things that stood out to me is I was watching one of their YouTube channels, and one of them was doing a Beltane ritual.
Beltane?
Beltane. I'm going to let that sink in for the audience as a whole for a second, then I'm going to explain why that's an issue for me. So, as somebody who studies Druidry, modern Druidry, we don't know what the ancient Druids used to do. I could do I've done series on it. I've done Walking the Druid Path video series, and I can do more. Trust me, there's a lot of stuff to talk about with Druidry. With that in mind, modern Druidry, let's specifically talk about Obod. There are about 300 years of modern reconstruction dealing with Druidry. And hey, how you doing, G? Welcome. I hope you don't mind that I posted my live in the pagan space, web of weird group. I hope that was okay. So let me read what he says real quick, and then I will talk about why I have a problem with Beltane. I'm currently working hard on learning Proto-Germanic. Rather than leaving the Elder Futhark and heading north, I'm slowly heading south and further back in time, but I don't claim either Alsatru or Asatru either. Fair.
It says Asatru, because there's no acute diacritic over the A, but yeah.
True, but I know sometimes people don't have it on their keyboard. Glad I did. Well, cool. I'm glad that you're here. By the way, Guff, I think you need to be friends with G. G, you need to be friends with Guff. Guff is fantastic. I know him from TikTok. I met G on Pagan Space. You guys would actually get along really, really well. But anyway, getting on the side topic.
You want to follow his profile? What the hell? His or her?
His, yeah. Interesting.
I can't see the icons like the size of a pinhole.
It's okay. I will, if you guys are interested in talking, I know you're both on Discord, and I will eventually convince Guff over to Pagan Space, whether he likes it or not. At some point, it's going to happen. So, Beltane. My problem with AFA doing Beltane. And I'm not trying to pick on AFA specifically. I know Guff doesn't mind doing that, but I'm saying in general. I have had arguments with people when it comes to the heathen holidays, because when I was mentioning modern revival Druidry, about 300 years tradition, a lot of it comes from the Welsh tradition. We have the Holiday of Beltane. It is a Druid, Celtic, Irish, Welsh type of tradition, okay?
Just said Celtic like 5 times. Druid, Welsh, Irish.
Well, Celtic technically refers to a language system, and there's not... Okay.
The Celts settled all up and down through that area.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. And Gaelic was a Celtic language, so I could technically just say Celtic. But my point is, it is a modern interpretation. Beltane is one of the 4 quarter holidays, and a lot of different traditions do it, including Wicca. And It is not rooted in Scandinavia. And I've had arguments with people about the holidays that, as far as I know, I was looking up and I kind of figure in my assumptions and configurations, you can follow the lunar cycles and pinpoint three major holidays that the Scandinavian people did. Jol is a middle one, but you also have Sigurblot and Hausblot. So you have basically three, or blot, however, I think bloat is how they say it.
Blow.
But it's a sacrifice is what it means. It's a day of celebration. But that's it. Those three. And here is somebody doing what is essentially a Celtic Wheel of the Year celebration. And I argued with people about this, and I'm just like, and they're like, oh, well, you can't follow the lunar cycle. You have to go by the solar cycle. And I'm like, the solar calendar. I was like, based upon what? And they're like, well, that's because that's what we do. And I'm like, this comes from Scandinavian people in Scandinavia. And I will tell you this, not only from research, but I have family in Iceland. They have basically two seasons, summer and winter. And at the beginning of summer and winter, you have a little transitional period, but they do not have the classical seasons that you see in the South. It's more extreme up there because they're further away from the equator. So it makes sense that they would celebrate, oh, we're about to hit winter. We survived midpoint of winter. Now it's time it's Sigurblot, it's Victory Blot. We're going to go raiding. That's raiding season. And then you go through the summer and then go through it again. So that makes sense to me. And we can see that in the sagas. We can look up historical references. By the way, Iceland has got a lot more holidays than that, but that's not the point. The point I'm bringing up is they don't have Beltane. Beltane is definitely something around Ireland and Britain and France. It is down in the south where Beltane would have been traditionally practiced. So that's what I meant by people bringing stuff up and making it up. You cause confusion.
That's something the Odinic Rite and the AFA does, because they share information, and there's definitely what's a nice way to do this? A proposed Anglo-Saxon connection with the Odinic Rite. They're trying to revitalize Anglo-Saxon paganism. The problem is we don't have any information about it outside of Beowulf, which was written in the early 700s, about 725ish, and that was them. That was the people talking about the previous society, because Christianity reached Britain in 595 with St. Augustine. And I don't remember the Kentish king, but that's where the Abbey of St. Augustine used to be called the Abbey of St. Peter and Paul. And before that, it was the Church of St. Martin. But that's where Christianity got its foothold into Britain. And by 687, the last pagan king was dead, Oleron from the Isle of Wight. So, I mean, in less than 100 years, they basically just did away with the Anglo-Saxons, or the Anglo-Saxons used in Frisian, the Anglo-Frisian language, right? All that was done, and Christianity took over. But the Odinic Rite and the AFA are trying to revitalize, in some sense, that, but they blend it with Norse paganism. We have a more fleshed out. So that's why you're going to see stuff like Beltane. I knew I heard the word, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But you're going to see stuff like that and other practices that they're going to blend. Again, like with words like weird. Weird is not a Norse concept. It's not a Norse idea. It's Earther, right? And it's essentially fate. And Urlug, like natural law. Like those are Norse concepts. But the bastardization you see in what they call modern Anglo-Saxon paganism, or it doesn't have any academic support. It's all UPG. Every single bit of Anglo-Saxon paganism is 100% UPG, because nobody has tied it back yet. I mean, if they do, cool. I can't wait to read that stuff. But that's the issue. Is they can't tie it back. What are you doing, crazy boy? Sorry, my dog's acting weird.
Getting into the conversation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Right. So, and obviously we could go off on a huge tangent. We could go off on this for a while. Thank you. I can't talk. It's been almost an hour and a half. So tangent is the word. Yeah, the word I was trying to say. But we could go off on this for a while. But the main point I think I want to try to get across specifically with this live is that doing what feels right is okay. Sharing things that you come up with are okay. But when
Absolutely.
we don't take the time to share resources so folks can make up their own mind, we start repeating things that we've done without knowing why, and then misinformation will confuse new folks.
Absolutely.
And I'm not trying to tell or dictate, and I don't think Guff is either. I'm not trying to dictate how others
No.
can practice or should practice, but I'm trying to caution everyone to be careful and to always ask why, based upon what. Those two questions are important in my opinion.
Or my famous tagline: "Cite your fucking source."
Yeah, he's so
Sorry.
eloquent with the words and articulate, and he just, yeah, no, he goes right to it. So that covers the four big topics. Then we had two other topics. We are probably pushing probably a little longer than we should have a live for, but it seems like people are they're still watching and still enjoying.
I mean,
Treating
we're already in. We might as well just do the topics. You can put those stamps on them, like, "Hey, you want to hear about this? Here you go."
right, right. And well, I can separate this out later too. And either way, I enjoy talking to you. So even if nobody watches this and we see folks interacting, Soaring Eagle, G, and even I think someone earlier, Jake, was it? Someone earlier was there too. When they mentioned he couldn't hear me, so we restarted the stream.
Oh, Jack Stone.
Yeah, Jack Stone. Thank you. I thought it was Jake. Jack Stone. But treating reconstructions as an organized faith for anyone who pursues it. That was the next topic I wanted to talk about. And the reason I wanted to bring this up ties directly into the UPG, directly into groups, so like some of the ones that we've already mentioned. And here's the thing. It is okay, obviously, you don't need my approval, but it is okay to come up with your own group, be inspired by whatever you want, take your spirituality where you want to, and organize that with a group of other practitioners. That's okay. What I don't think is okay is making the assumption that just because I so happen to study modern reconstruction stuff that has to do with heathenry and Scandinavian stuff, that does not mean I get to assume you do exactly what I do, nor get mad at you for not doing exactly what I do. And I think I'm seeing that mostly on TikTok, I know. But people on TikTok will get on there and they will tell you about stuff like the hammer test, which we just talked about. That's UPG, that's made up, that is brand new, and that's fine. The Nine Noble Virtues, that is a new concept. That's fine. Okay, fine. But don't expect everybody who wears any symbol, Mjolnir or not, anyone who wears a symbol to instantly be doing it the same way that you do, and then to use that as a weapon to cancel each other. Like, well, you're not practicing the way I do, therefore you're not a true heathen or pagan or Norse, whatever term you use. I have an issue with that. I have an issue with people trying to treat a personalized path, especially if you go back to the sources. And I'm going all the way back not only to my own family, but things that I've read in the Scandinavian traditions, as far as I know, and I think, Guff, you can confirm this in just a second when I let you talk, is that in Scandinavia, they didn't really separate out spirituality like we do today. In our society today in the United States, there is very much the daily life folks live, and then they go to church on Sundays. Not that everyone goes to church, but those who do that type of monotheistic practice separates a special day for it. They define it. They define themselves to their spirituality. In the Norse Scandinavian culture, especially back in the Viking era, you were people and you lived together. Everyone had things they were good at. You had your person who was mostly spiritual. You had your people who were hunters or warriors or blacksmith. You had people who had roles and jobs, but the spirituality was ingrained as part of how you lived. It was cultural. It wasn't separate like we think about it today. So to try to dictate this spiritual path and build it like our modern concept of religion, and then to try to impose that on others just doesn't make sense to me personally.
You just cut out. You there? My turn. So, I absolutely differentiate between heathens, focused heathens, and neo-Norse pagans. That's generally what I call them. Just neo-Norse pagans are people, because it's neo, it's new, um, and Norse pagans because they follow Norse paganism. Yeah, sorry about Discord, everybody. But so when I say I'm a heathen or somebody is folkish, it means they are traditional, they follow the traditions, and that's what heathenry is. Um, when I say Neo-Norse paganism, I'm specifically referring to people who add UPG or do whatever they want, but they're Norse inspired. Because, like you say, Blaze, everybody's absolutely allowed to practice however they want, but there is a difference between heathens and non-heathens, or just general pagans, or eclectic paganism, all different types of paganism. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But like you said, we did not, as a culture, did not differentiate between um, traditions and theological the theological structure and the well, I think boy and the cultural or the societal structure, right? Like the gods were just part of life. I call it the cultural worldview, mainly because um, it's just the way, like when there was thunder in the air, in the sky, it wasn't thunder, it was Thor, who is thunder. That's who was making that noise. When the sun come up, it wasn't a star, it was Suna. And modernly, because I believe in science and I'm up to date. I like believe in saving the earth and stuff like that. York, but that doesn't mean I still can't identify those in like some sort of pseudo animism. I can't identify, my deities, my belief structure, my gods, with stuff that's around us. I mean, to let me try to think of this. It's just really important to realize that my brain is being stupid. There's definitely a difference. I was trying to think of what you said, Blades. Oh yeah, tying the theology with everything else. The theology is just part. It's really important to remember and realize that the theology was just intertwined in their daily lives. It wasn't like you said, like where you go to church on Sunday and you go sin on Monday through Saturday. It was nothing like that. And when people try to change the traditions, I take a very personal issue with that when they say, "Oh, I'm a North Heathen skull brother." I'm like, chill out with that. Number one, stop stop misrepresenting the language. Number one, but two, it's just educate yourself. I mean, if you have done any reading whatsoever on the Eddas and the Sagas, you'll know that the gods are just a part of daily life. But it's not. I notice this a lot from Christians who convert, or yeah, I can hear you. Christians who attempt to convert, they have a very big issue with letting go of their traditions. You'll notice that modernly in Neo-Norse paganism, I guess I'll just use that term now, since you guys heard it already. In Neo-Norse paganism, you'll hear a lot of brother and sister, right? Like, hey, brother, this or sister that. And it's what in the Germanic ideology, it's false kinship. Like in German, you don't call just anybody a friend, a Freund, right? You call them Bekanntschaft, meaning an acquaintance. But I noticed that a lot of people are very keen, and I think this has a lot to do with how excited people are to be a part of the group. And since over the last 10 years or so, since the Viking show came out, people are extremely excited to jump into this because it's very in vogue right now. But before all that, there was no such thing as calling people brother and sister. You know, it was just like, hey, dude. And I think people are taking it in a very culty direction, which is again, if that's your bag, that's fine. But again, this is why I say we need to harken back to the sources and really delve into not just the Eddas and the Sagas, but the sociology, the anthropology, the Norse society itself. Um, because I think that's what a lot of people are missing. And when you just read the Sagas and the Eddas, you don't see all this stuff play out. Or I mean, when you just read the Eddas, but if you read the Sagas, you see them living up to the Eddas, and you see them following examples set in the Eddas. Like well, Ebar and I were just talking about this today. Speaking of mixing theology, um, um, theology and daily practice. The Eddas are like parables. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Locust Senna, or yeah, Locust Senna. where Loki goes into Agir's hall and he starts, insulting everybody automatically. And anybody else would have been kicked out of the hall for being so rude. But, Loki's like, hey, where's my drink? And Odin begrudgingly, kind of lets him sit down because he says, Mantufat Odin, ervit yawardaga, blend blow the saman, which means, do you remember, Odin, in the days of old when we blended our blood together? Basically, they made an oath. And the oath was that Odin shall never be brought a drink unless Loki is brought one too. And basically it's saying, be careful who you, the whole of the North mythos is be careful, what you do with your time, be careful what you put your energy or into, or the decisions you make, because they can come back to bite you. Because Odin and Loki were, as close as it gets, they made a blood oath together. But if we look towards the end at Ragnarok, what happens? Loki and his ilk and his begotten destroy the Aesir. Like I say, people are so focused on certain aspects of Norse culture, like the warrior part, that they fail to realize that there's a lot of beauty throughout the entirety of the culture that has more to do than just with saying "Hail Odin" and let's drink some mead. The poetry is beautiful. The parables are informative and educational. There's so much more than just let's go a Viking, you know.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to rant.
No, by all means, it's conversation. You can hear me, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
for another 30 seconds.
Exactly. So those of you just joining in, my Discord keeps going out, so we're gonna try Zoom or Skype or something for the next live. Tanulis, shout out to Tanulis. Tanulis is a buddy of mine. We've been talking for years. He mostly druid stuff, and I know we talked about some sorcery stuff too. But Tanulis is an awesome guy. I think you would enjoy talking to him. Very theological in his conversation, and he loves digging into stuff like this. He would
cut out again.
Of course I did. So while he can't hear me, for whatever reason, Discord will stop working.
I don't know if it's.
But you can all hear me.
It might be on my side. I don't know how.
Let me try to leave his call and join his call again.
I'll have to call with you and restart the call. Maybe that'll help.
Let's see. Do it.
Type in the comments if you think that's a good idea.
Do it.
Oh, maybe it wouldn't, because then I would go disappear from it. Oh, do it? Leave the call and... Leave the call and rejoin. Okay, I'm going to leave the call and rejoin.
All right, so we will turn off his camera for a second. Yeah, go ahead. All right, we'll see if he rejoins and if he can hear me.
Hello?
Hi, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfect.
There you go. So we'll have you leave and come back, maybe to reboot your cache or something. See if you can turn your video back on. If worst case comes to worst case, we'll just leave your video off.
Yeah. Can you hear me still?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome.
Like a bell.
I knew it was your side. I knew it. We'll get this figured out. I can hear Blaze still. Yeah, Tanulis, in the Discord call, he can't hear me on his side. So you all can still hear me the whole time. We can all still hear him the whole time, but he just can't hear me. So I keep telling him to stop muting me, but, when I met you, I was into Druidry, but it's been over a decade, and I have landed on alchemy and Hermeticism. Nice. Okay. Yeah, and that's why I paused for a second, because I know last time we had talked, we had shared an interest in Druidry, modern reconstruction Druidry, obviously. But cool. Awesome. Welcome, Tanulis. So we were just talking about people basically kind of not understanding the culture of where things come from, but then trying to claim it. And I want to go Viking, and I've got an axe, and I wear Mjolnir, so therefore I'm a Norse pagan. So one of the things I want to talk about, and it will lead into our last topic for the day, because we're going on an hour and a half here, and I doubt someone's going to sit through a two hour video, but who knows? Maybe we're awesome. But I wanted to mention too, and this could be a topic in and of itself, is I do find some frustration too when folks try to not only build things out and claim it as being heathen Scandinavian, and it's not. And one of the things is the language. You mentioned skull. Skull means cheers. It literally translates to bowl, but you say it when you're drinking. But people are using it as a greeting of saying hi. And I hate to burst everyone's bubble. In modern Icelandic, they actually say hello. Like, mild accent there, but that's it. Hello. They'll actually say hello. I mean, you can say, of course, the masculine, feminine ones. And I know Guff knows all this. You can say Seil or Seich. You can say Seich ok. Come du Seich ok, blessed du. Come blessed. Come welcome. You know, there's different ways of saying hi, but basically hello is fine. But people want to do skull because it makes them more Viking, apparently. And
happy.
Yeah. The thing that drives me nuts.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to talk over you, but the whole calling them gods and goddesses, I'm okay with that because we're trying to translate it. The way that I understand it, there's the Aesir, the Vanir, and the Jotnar, and they represent forces of the universe. The Jotnar are like your forces of chaos and destruction. The Aesir are your sky deities, the higher justice deities, and Vanir are the deities of the people. They're like of the land and stuff, the way I understand it. So a lot of people keep using this terminology, like Thor is the god of thunder, especially with Marvel. And you don't find in any of the sources them mentioning of. When they talk about Thor, or they talk about Odin, or Loki, or Freya, or Idun, any of them, they talk about them as having attributes or associations. This whole of concept is a Greek and Roman concept, but people apply it to there all the time. Like, you'll especially see this. Let's take Thor, because you just mentioned it, Guff. His name basically means thunder.
It doesn't basically shit. It is. Thor is thunder. Just like in Proto-Germanic, Thunara is thunder. Just like in Proto-Indo-European, what we believe to be Perkunius. So, it's exactly how you say it. These are the embodiment of what they are. Odin is not just, he may have a human physical form, or or whatever, not to anthropomorphize, but he is mental instability. He is the mad one. Freya is not just Freya, is not just a lady. She is the lady. And people, and some of the names we can't translate very well, but or we can't find an etymology, we can't find the meaning of. But we definitely know the way that the Norse, if you do again academic research and study, Thor's hammering his anvil. That's something you hear in the show Vikings. Usually it was Thor's fighting or something like that, or Thor Berrias or something like that. But what is it, Cormacher Saga? Oh no, that was just talking about Mjolnir. But he's like, I have Thor's, and they interchangeably kind of talk about them being physical deities and then them being abstract concepts. Like I have Thor's hammer here, or the way it's hard to explain to people who don't speak Old Norse and understand Old Norse and Icelandic.
Pausing for just a second because G said mental instability. Perfect, love it.
Well, I mean, that's what it means. He's mad in the British sense. That boy is mad. I mean, he's crazy, but he's the personification of it. I mean, look at what he does to get a few drinks of what's the really nice way to call it? Dwergblod, dwarf blood. I was looking through the Kenning section of Prozetta, all the different names they have for Orderir. Kvasir's Mead, Kvasir's Blood, Orderir Bold and Sun, the three vessels that held it. Look what he does to get a little glimpse of Mimir's knowledge. He scoops out a fucking eye. I mean, he's the true, archetypal madman indeed. Absolutely. I mean, he is willing to do any and everything and sacrifice anything and anyone in his quest for knowledge and foresight. He just wants to know everything. And he's the embodiment of
in my opinion, mental instability. And Thor, I mean, you think of thunder and lightning, they're unpredictable, they're powerful, they're scary, terrifying. I mean, but that's Thor. That is Thor. That is what he does. I mean, he's feared by just about everything that walks around. You know, how many different stories of Thor whipping the hell out of something or ready to fight and to cause devastation and damage. And what does thunder bring? Lightning. And what does lightning do? Damages things. I mean, it's unimaginably powerful.
Yeah.
And we see these representations. And Tyr, I could go on about Tyr too, but Tyr is supposed to be balance and justice and wisdom. And you see him doing he'll bend over backwards and fold himself into a pretzel if he thought that was going to save everybody. He's the mediator. Tyr means Lord, and this is why people think it comes from, he used to be the sky god, or like the chief of the gods, and then the cult of Odin that swept through in the 600s, the middle of the Vendel period, replaced Germanic paganism, Germanic tribalism, with Tyr being the chief god to Odin. But I mean, if we scratch more than the surface, it's amazing to see that there is so much more to the gods and goddesses than you would see in a show like Vikings or AC Valhalla or any of that stuff. I mean, there's ogres are like onions. There's layers,
Right.
and people just really miss out when they don't sift through the layers. Like, this is why I tell people you need to read the Poetic Edda, the Prose Edda, because there's so much extra in there that you're gonna miss if you read, for instance, Neil Gaiman.
Which he's not
That's
bad, but
entertainment.
right. He's not
My
bad.
studies over the years, my intuition tells me Odin is actually Marduk in the Mesopotamian stories, like the Enuma Elish. I don't know how to pronounce that. And he was banished and went to the north to run his own tribe. Yeah, and I mean, sure, I don't know about Marduk, and I definitely don't know anything about Mesopotamia. Theologically speaking, I straight up focus on the Viking Age. I focus on the Vendel and the Viking period, which is why I can kind of pick things apart a little bit better than most. But I know I need to broaden my knowledge a little bit. We're really summing up the troopers. The god. Yeah, it blows my mind. But this is the problem, though. This is what young heathens, young pagans, young polytheists of all walks. There's so much information out there, and I've spent years, studying anything I can get my hands on, and unfortunately, I've run across some really horrible material. Well, just non-academic, which to me is horrible. And I missed out on all that time being able to research this stuff. And this is again why I tell people, hey, learn if you're into Norse paganism, whatever you want to call it. It's never bad to invest in learning about the actual people, the culture, which includes the language, because there's so much more to learn than just reading an Eddic translation in English. The whole point is to be more like Odin. I to sharpen your mind. I mean, what does he say about Hugin and Munin? He's like, I often thought in memory. He's worried about Munin never returning. Hug from Hugr to think, and Munin is memory. He's often afraid that Munin will never return and he'll lose his memory, which is something I actually think about because my mom has a little bit of she seems to be slipping a bit, and I just find so many similarities between myself and Olden in this case of being so greedy for knowledge. I buy books and books, and I watch videos, and I go down internet rabbit holes, and I exhaust myself on knowledge sometimes, but it's never enough, you know. And I think there's a lot of things we can learn from the Edison sagas, other than Thor likes to dress like a girl sometimes, and Loki likes getting into trouble. Again, when you scratch more than the surface,
I mean, you're in for a wild ride. I didn't mean to go off on a huge tangent, but I'm really good at it.
Yeah, I know. Testing. Can you hear me?
Huh? Yeah, I can
Oh,
hear you.
yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up that I thought was interesting, especially with the new Marvel movie Thor: Love and Thunder that came out, which I I can enjoy the
No
Marvel.
spoilers. I haven't seen it yet.
I'm not gonna ruin it.
Okay.
Even though I'm not a huge fan of Marvel's depiction of the what is part of my culture and heritage and my ancestors, it is what it is. It's,
Chris Hemsworth is hot. Just kidding. Sorry. Go ahead.
but it is what it is, and if, as long as you take it as fantasy, a lot of people don't seem to care. But it is fantasy. It is far removed. But I think a lot of people think of Thor being associated or being the god of lightning and thunder. Again, as we talked about, he is thunder, but we don't talk about him as being the god of. So recently, Jackson Crawford was talking about this because the movie was coming out. That's why I brought it up, not to ruin the movie. But he mentioned, because when I was read through some of the sagas and eddas, I've not read them all, I don't have them all memorized, but when I've read through them, I don't ever remember any of the Aesir, Vani, or Jotnar being specifically said god of or goddess of anything. It's always stories about them almost being like actual people. And I don't remember reading about Thor having anything to do with lightning and thunder. And then Jackson Crawford pointed out that in the Edda, Skulls Kaparamal, this one, I'll put it in chat. And this one is the only.
I just said it. Stop them all.
Yes. Well, I wanted to put it for those that wanted to look it up too.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It drives me nuts when people are like talking about something. I'm like, what did they say? So look in the chat if you want to look up the poem. But apparently, that is the only time that they mention specifically Thor being the word for thunder. So that's the only association they've had with thunder. I'm going to look at you for this, Guff. Do you know of any other reference to Thor being associated with thunder and lightning besides for that one?
That's in the prose edda, by the way. Not off the top of my head, no. And but real quick, Odin is talked about in because you have the Gulfaginning, which is the beginning part of prose edda. Then you have Skaldskaparmal. Then you have Napna book or something like shit like that. Skaldskaparmal goes over the Haiti, the names of, and the Kennings. So like Odin being called Gangleri or many other words, Yolnir, the Yule one. But Odin actually is attested in the 9th chapter of Prose Edda, right before Skaldskaparmal, as being the father of, or the I guess not the god of, but the father of all men and all gods. Just saying.
Fair. No, I appreciate that. That's why we have
You
these
still
wonderful.
there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but that's why we have these conversations. That's why I love talking to Guff. Guff's not the only person I talk to. It's just Guff is one of the few social media buffs that's out there. And like I said, me and him bugged each other on TikTok a lot. Which, by the way, if anyone hasn't already seen, there will be in the description below links to Guff stuff. If you want to check him out on TikTok, he does have a YouTube. Not a lot of videos on his channel yet, but definitely check him out on TikTok. And if you don't have a TikTok, create one because the stuff's good. The last thing that we had for a topic today, because me and Guff could talk for days on end. We could literally do a live every day and just keep going.
Talk till bedtime.
Right. Easy. And we've done it before. You've had lives and I'm sitting there 2 or 3 hours later. My wife's like, are you going to get off TikTok? And I'm like, no, I'm talking to Guff. She's like, well, hurry up.
Quiet, lady.
All right. Yes. Calm down. We have conversations here.
I'm doing nerd stuff, damn it.
No, she's very supportive, but obviously 3 hours on a mobile app, she wants to spend time with me too. So go figure. The last topic I want to talk about is wearing symbols, and I will not get into tattoos because I do want to talk about Aegis Yalmer and stuff, and the fact that people tattoo it, and that's not the reference for it, and it's not even from the Viking era. I want to talk about symbols like Guff is holding up there, specifically Mjolnir. And I'm not wearing mine right now, but I wear it when I go out and it just sits next to me, because here's the thing. What I want to start this conversation off with is there has been this new trend talking about UPG, talking about making things up, that if you're heathen, you have to wear the Mjolnir. And my understanding, so I went to the Viking exhibit when it was at my local museum, saw all the stuff, which was awesome. And I've done research online, blah, blah, blah. What it comes down to is this. Here's my opinion with Mjolnir. We know people used to wear it. We found it in tons of graves. We know it was a very popular symbol. It was probably one of the most popular symbols. It is not the only symbol. Not everybody wore it. And it is not an indication that you're heathen. Yes, people use it today, but I don't understand why people feel like this is the only symbol you should wear. And if you're wearing it, they're instantly saying, skull brother, skull sister to you instantly because you have a hammer. And I guess I don't know. To me, it's fine to wear, but I wish people would stop treating it like the Christians treat the cross or the crucifix. Like, you wear it, that's how you say you're Christian. That's how you announce it to the world. Or Wiccans with the pentagram, or pentacle, I should say. What are your thoughts, Guff?
So, like I was saying in Cormaker's saga, let me Minnesota that up for our Midwestern audiences. Um, they talk about wearing Mjolnir in the saga, and they talk about how it protects them. And you'll also notice I joinked out because I have Galderstubber. I have whenever this pops up on there, I have sleep thorn on my fist in case I hit anybody and hope they get to sleep. Symbolism is huge for paganism. Minnesota does have an accent. You hang out here, get me drunk. I go half Texan, half Minnesota. Oh yeah, you know. Hi, baby girl. Sorry, my dog was. But Mjolnir was used a lot, and if anybody wants to know, mine is a Repton hammer, I guess. Somebody pointed that out to me, and I looked at it. I was like, "Holy shit, that is a Repton hammer." I just like it because it's very simplistic. I don't think being gaudy is my personal statement. I honestly can't fucking stand it. My wife has bought me a couple hammers, and she's a Christian, and she was like, "You like it?" And the first one she bought was really gaudy looking, and I'm like, So it's all personal choice, but so was wearing symbols back in the day. We have, I think, not a Gibualja, that one luck symbol or whatever. Algies. We have an Algies symbol that was from the Viking Age. That is, Algies is a rune, and it was thought to mean protection. Sorry, my wife was calling me. Hold on. Talk for a second.
Yes, sir. I'll talk during my own live. Thank you for permission, sir. Very kind of you. Yeah, so one of the things I guess I'll talk about while I'm waiting on it, I'm just picking on him. Guff's a good guy. Let's see. Didn't realize Minnesotan had an accent. Lol. I go full Texan when drinking. I wonder what I'd turn into if I ever drink. Let us know. Record it. Record it as proof and evidence. So the reason I was bringing up specifically the symbol, and I'm not saying it's not a protection symbol. I wear it specifically because it's a protection symbol. That's exactly why I have my Mjolnir. And I also wear it because my ancestors wore it. Mine's gaudy. It has nothing to do with historical Mjolnir at all. And actually, looking at that Viking exhibit, I found that this wasn't, again, the only symbol that they wore. They wore a lot of crosses. They wore a lot of crosses that were hammers, especially when they started converting closer to, like, what was it? 1000 CE, I think, is when they started doing, like, the last conversion I want to say was 1044, and that was, oh, so now I'm going to have to look this up here. Here it is. Okay, so the last conversion was 1066. That was the end. Technically, the end of the Viking era was 1066. So yeah, as they started converting, Denmark converted 900 CE, and you start seeing, you know, different type of mixtures there. But you also see a lot of axes, swords, and spears. You can actually find, and I have it on my one video where I took pictures at the museum, and you can actually see sword and spear necklaces and amulets and stuff that they're wearing. We don't know a lot about their tattoos because their skin didn't survive. So we don't even know if they had tattoos. But today, a lot of people think of them as having tattoos. I just like bringing it up because people instantly go to that symbol right away. Or they'll go to something like the Aegishjalmur, or they'll go to the, what are some of the other ones? The Valnut is a very popular one. There is also the Vegvisir is another popular one. The Vegvisir and the Aegishjalmur, though, are from modern Iceland, modern-ish. I want to say, what, 1800s? I'm going to have to look at my notes. I don't have it memorized. Hold manuscript is, of course, where they came from. I've given 1600s, sorry. 1600s is where they come from. And there's mentions of some of them older, but seeing the symbols. So again, you don't have to wear symbols if you're following a path. You don't have to announce it to the world and wear a Mjolnir necklace. Now, there's nothing wrong with wearing it. Again, I wear it myself, but that was the main point I wanted to bring up there, is the whole wearing of symbols and if you should even wear them at all. I know if you look at the whole manuscript, they actually tell you how to use the Aegis-Hjalmar.
Sorry, the wife called. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Hello?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello? Testing, testing.
Hello?
I can't hear him. Can hear you, but you can't hear me. Go ahead and leave and rejoin the Discord. Like that. He already did. Okay. Look at him. He's learning. We were teaching him. Can you hear me now? I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Okay. My wife can hear us both. I know. He keeps losing the ability to hear me. So yeah, what I was saying while you were gone is I was talking about at the Viking exhibit, I saw a lot of swords, axes, spears, and other various symbols. It wasn't just Mjolnir. And once they started converting to Christianity around 900 CE, Denmark started converting, and 1066 was when basically Sweden, the last country, converted over. So you see actually some crosses or some cross hammers, some mixtures and stuff. But yeah, Mjolnir was... Go ahead.
They're called a wolf cross.
Wolf cross. I was not aware of that. Thank you. But I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, my point is you don't have to wear a symbol if you don't want to. And just because it's Mjolnir, it's like people think I'm a heathen, I have to go get a hammer, and that's just not the case.
No, we have evidence that they wore all these, which could also be another thing from a different clan called the Herules. They were thought to have been maybe Scythians, the ones that started the Aryans, like the Germanic peoples are thought to come from Scythians. And the Heruli symbol looked like Augies, I think. I can't remember all the details, but troll crosses are definitely not like from the Norse era. Or I say Norse and I mean Vendel and Viking period, or Vendel period and Viking age. That's
Fair.
why I say Norse era. And I mean, they can wear different, whatever you want, basically. And it's just things that they thought represented their their gods. And I'm speaking a little more broadly about Germanic paganism as well as Norse paganism, which are definitely different.
Very different. By the way, you forgot to turn your camera back on. And we have a question in the chat, so I'm going to interrupt you like a rude host. Tanula says, do you make rune sigils for protections? Me, I do not. I know some people who do, and I think we could definitely have a whole conversation about sigils and bind runes and my opinion about them in a future video, because I think it can be a long conversation. What about you, Guff? Do you make sigils for protection?
No, I might carve a Yule log, but if I was going to do anything, because I was thinking about making a headstone for my dog, but that's there's very little evidence to support sigils or anything like that from the actual Vendel period Viking age. Like we see Ansu's rune, which is definitely from the time period of early Old Norse, so middle Vendel period. Being thrown into bogs on wood chips, which stands for God, like some sort of connection with connection with a god or gods. But we see very little representation outside of the linguistic evidence for runes being used for anything, and we do have linguistic evidence on runestone of curses, like whoever touches the stone is going to be in a bad way. So as for sigils, no. It's the same thing for what we call bindarunar, bind runes. Bind runes were used historically as language for speech and language. The most famous, of course, would be Herald Bluetooth's symbol, which you can drag down on your phone right now. And there's a it looks like a bee with two little tails on it, like a capital B, and that's how you would do HB in younger Futhar. if stacked, it's called stacked runes sometimes.
And that is, in
Um,
fact, an actual bind rune for a real historical person who I think his teeth were rotting. That's why they called him Bluetooth, I thought. But they actually referred to him as Bluetooth.
yeah, his name was. I mean, there's a lot of heralds. Howard Flower, fair hair, Havrada, hard ruler, all the. But yeah, Bluetooth was pretty famous.
I'm sorry. Let
Um,
me pause you for one moment. One moment. Let me interject. Tanula said, "Forgive me if you spoke about this early. I came in towards the end. Tanulis, never worry about asking questions, regardless of when you jump in. I don't mind repeating myself." G said, "The coyote in me enjoys such things." And G, like we mentioned earlier in the stream, do you, man? It doesn't have to always. Everything you do does not have to be historical Norse paganism. But at the same time, we advise that folks don't share things that are not as historical stuff. Like if someone wants to do casting of the runes, if they want to do sigils, sure. There's not historical references of it being done. It's a modern thing, but just accept it for what it is our advice. And then
yeah,
used as shorthand, basically. Yes, G, I think that's a good way of summarizing it. Sorry, Guff, to cut you off.
I was gonna clip Tantalus. How do you say that correctly? Tantalus.
I pronounce it Tanulis, but I don't know if it's accurate. I've called him that for years, though, and he's never corrected me, so Tanulis.
Um, so you say, I recall seeing a weapon with runes etched into it. Is that an anomaly or common, do you think? I don't have to think. I know this. We do have evidence from the Viking Age of a triple gear rune, which was technically stacked on top of each other. Um, and that was used in a magical context to either mean victory, like Sigurd, which means victory in Old Norse. Sorry, Dougie's being crazy. Um, but more likely because Tyr was thought to be very powerful. Um, so we see that. We also see the Ulfberht swords from the late 8th, early 9th century, and then all their copies all the way to the 11th century. So, unlike what's that new Viking movie, Norseman, something like that?
The Northman.
Blaze, look me up.
The Northman. Can he not hear me again?
Blaze,
The Northman.
leave.
Leave and rejoin. Guff. If you can't hear me. Man. Blame his phone and his connection. I know you all can hear me, but yeah, he can't hear me at all, and he's waiting for me to respond. Look at the chat. I believe you, Guff. I recall seeing a weapon with runes etched into it. Is that an anomaly or common, do you think? There's actually quite a few. Like, for example, the Ulfberht, which was a famously made sword. Oh, it looks like he might have froze. The Ulfberht, historically, was a sword that was crafted with specifically crucible steel. It was supposed to be a method that they had learned from further out east. I believe from India. I think. I might have to double check that. But they had runes on that. And it was common to put words on weapons, but it was usually so-and-so owns me. So people would put their name on it. They would like label it, kind of like putting your name on your baseball bat if you go to sports, as an example. So that was pretty common. Talking about the Northmen, though, like he was just mentioning, where it says Draugr. First of all, I don't even think those runes are accurate, or at least not accurate for the time period they're suggesting it from. But naming a sword like that, I don't think naming a sword like that would have been very accurate. Blaze is accurate. Okay, cool. So I have been pronouncing your name right for all these years. Cool. More like Tenacious. The Northmen leave and rejoin. Let's see if he actually comes back. Can you hear me
I'm
now,
here.
Guff? Can you hear me?
Yo,
Okay. You froze for a second there. I was just talking about the fact that as far as I know, runes on weapons in general was semi-common, but it was usually stuff like so-and-so owns me. They like put their name on it as like a label, but the Ulfberht also had the name on it, but I think that was actually the manufacturer who made it with crucible steel. But like you were saying in the Northmen,
it wasn't Crucible, but yeah.
it wasn't? I could have sworn the Ulfberht was made out of crucible steel.
They think it was made out of crucible steel. What they believe is that well, my theory is he traded for it and got traditional wood steel, which is like what we would call Damascus. It's essentially pattern welded steel. Um, but wood steel we don't know the original formula. Um, so essentially, I think Ulfbert and his son got their hands on it and then his son died and didn't have a son because the sword didn't continue. They continued for like I think 80 years. We'd have like legitimate Ulfberht swords made in that process, or they just ran out of metal. Um, but you got to realize during that time they didn't understand metalwork. I mean, they were still using water to quench blades.
True.
So
I was using my reference for the Ulfbert being out of Crucible Steel, just to share again references. The Secrets of the Viking Sword. That's a documentary they did. So I don't know if it's accurate, but that's what I was going off of.
so the guy from Wisconsin who redid it, he made a sword out of crucible steel using all old methods because I think this is the same documentary where they talk about Ulfberht. Um, but yeah, I mean, he redid it and he used the crucible steel technique, and then he did it that way, and it was just as strong as 1095. So yeah, I mean, it's a viable means, but I mean, they didn't know about that much about steel until like the 1700s. So um, there's no record of it anyways. However, in the Viking age, or right around that time, we know in India that they had that capability to make that type of steel consistently, which we call Wootz steel, Wootz. So my theory is that they traded for it down the eastern route, through the Volga River down to Ukraine, and they got it that way. Because other than that, if it would have been any other way, I mean, the technique would have survived, you know, and because that was a very popular sword. And if the guy would have kept knowing how to make it, he would have kept making it, and his son would have kept making it, unless, of course, his son died early and didn't have any more sons, or wasn't able to pass it on. But
It's a very
uh,
good point.
you said you thought it was common that there was engravings on swords.
Not common, but it wasn't uncommon. So it wasn't unheard of that you would see it on weapons, period, especially axes, anything out of wood. They would carve stuff like the owner of it. It would say this belongs to, kind of like a name tag, less than I'm naming the sword a special sacred name.
Yeah.
I again saw this in a YouTube video. It was some sort of documentary. It was some guy who works in a museum who was explaining it, and he gave some examples of some wooden axe hafts that had people's names on them. He also said that
Yeah.
they used this, they would do wooden name tags on their goods, and again, it would just be like the owner's name, and they would put name tags like on a thong and hang it from their goods when they're traveling, and then they would put it on combs and stuff. You would see people put their name on it just to kind of label their own property.
I call it Viking graffiti because
Yeah.
they loved putting their name on stuff. Or Halfdan was here and he stood up and farted, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but I mean, yeah, and when I study runes and like Ivar put me in a couple friggin' groups on Facebook with just some craziness. But every once in a while they'll step into some stuff. And actually this morning when Ivar and I were talking about some academic studies we're teaming up on, he showed me some runes, and he's like, "What do you think this means?" I'm like, "It's absolute gibberish," and he's like, "Yeah, me too." And then we were talking about specifically it was an Orkney stone, and it said this right it was that this guy is, or this one is that the Risti that the Runster Meister how west of uh Weiss Westerhoff. And Ivar and I were going back and forth. What the hell does this mean? And I'm like, well, pretty, evenly said this is the best rune carver west of the sea or west of the ocean. And Ivar and I were going back and forth on it. And he's like, well, but I don't know, he got his cardinal directions fucked up. Because he was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. They're talking about Iceland. And this is a guy who speaks fluently in Icelandic and a guy who knows his runes. And it's confusing sometimes for us to even look at simple sentences. So when people get, you know, when they're like, what's the etymology of this? Sometimes it's not so easy to tell, which is why runic inscriptions, they don't have any, what's not, I can't keep using the word symmetry. they're not all the same. The way runes are spelled. So when we date runes, especially on rune stones, but this would be the same for swords and stuff like that. To tell if something's authentic or not, you would have to look at the speech in which it's on. Like if it's older speech, newer speech within the Norse paradigm, right? And then you also have to look at artwork surrounding it. Usually we do that on runestones. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's again, Rune's a Handbook by Michael P. Barnes shows some really incredible stuff. If you guys are interested in any types of runes and rune carving and how the runes were used. Um, but yeah, it's another topic. I could literally, we could spend 3 hours just talking about runes. All set
Yes.
up.
Yes, and in fact, speaking of which, I wanted originally to do a live for an hour. We're hitting 2 hours and 14 minutes. And that's minus all the technical difficulties we had. So I believe we should bring this live to an end. We at least talked about all the topics we wanted to talk about. All of these topics, as Scuff was just saying, we could expand upon. And I really want to thank everyone, not only for hanging out who are watching it now, but those who dropped in and anyone who sees this in the future, because I'm going to leave it up on my channel. But just in closing, I wanted to say again, Guff, thank you for joining me. As always, it's fun to talk and collaborate. But you can check out Guff on TikTok. You can see a link below in the description, but he is _historical_heathen. And he has his own YouTube channel as well, even though there's not a lot of videos on it yet. So definitely check him out. And Guff, do you have any closing comments or statements?
Yeah, first off, thanks for not making me, but inviting me to do this, and thanks for everybody coming in and interacting. I do a lot, or I used during winter, I do a lot of lives, and it's great when people actually come in and interact and give us more minutia to sift through when we're actually talking about this, because obviously we're not here for money, we're here for passion. And we love talking about this, and we love it when people share in our enjoyment and our passion for these subjects. So thank you guys so much for coming in and supporting us. And I hope you all have a wonderful night.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like Tunelis put one more thing. He said, so much has been lost in history. It's pretty depressing. Happy to see you more soon. Absolutely, I agree with you. It is sad to hear all of the things that have disappeared. That's why I think it's important to have these conversations, to share these videos, to keep alive the little that's out there. But let's actually keep alive the actual sources. If stuff is going to get made up and added, that's fine. Again, as I've mentioned before, the Hold manuscript from the 1600s is new and it's part of modern stuff. But don't tell me you're making a Viking Age shield with Aegis-Hjalmar on it. It's just, no. It's not, it wasn't around.
It was never attested to symbolically. It was only attested to in the Eddas.
Yes.
I think in the Prose Edda, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it was when they fought the dragon Fafnir, they mentioned the Aegis-Hjalmar, the Helm of Terror.
Yeah, well, when Fafnir...
well, in that particular one, they just mention it being there almost as if it was like a helmet, but putting it on the brow, I think it's specifically an iron, and it was drawn on the brow. That was from the Hold manuscript in the 1600s. I don't think that we actually have anything in the sagas that they actually used it or described how it looked, did they?
That would be in the Eddas, and yeah, that would be in Skaldskaparmál, as a matter of fact. Because what happens is Odin, Loki, and I think Thor are running about together, and Loki's like, hey, check this out, look what I can do, and throws this rock and kills an otter. Anyways, this dude comes out, he's like, oh my god, you killed my brother. And so in order to pay them, Loki goes and steals or puts somebody up for a bunch of money in cursed gold, and all the cursed gold goes to the father. Well, Fafnir and his two brothers kill their dad to get the gold, and then the brothers start fighting amongst each other. And then I forgot who exactly it was. But anyways, Fafnir ended up killing one of his brothers, and the other brother ran away. And that's when they mentioned Aegis-Hjalmar. And then the other brother tricks, I think tricks Sigrid into killing Fafnir. And then Sigurd kills the other brother too because he tricked him into doing it, and that's where I think he gets the treasure, and that's why his stuff runs bad.
Huh.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
Like I said, yeah, if there's references to more than it just being a helmet or actually how to use it and stuff from those original ones, please send that to me so I can update my records. I'm always willing to learn more. And it looks like G said it's been cool. See you guys on Discord and Pagan Space. Absolutely. Hopefully we'll get Guff on there. We'll figure it out. Blaze, send me the Discord link later. Absolutely. Cool. Thanks for answering the questions I had. Absolutely, Soaring Eagle. Thank you all again. But as you just heard, we bring up a topic and we'll run down that rabbit hole. So we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, you guys have a great one.